6 weeks. That's how long I've been confined to this hospital bed, according to the sympathetic whispers of the nursing staff. 6 weeks during which my devoted fiancé, Ethan, has apparently decided our 5-year relationship and engagement meant nothing, transforming our shared dreams into his private playground with another woman. As I lie here, able to move but deliberately keeping my recovery secret, I realize that leaving the hospital might have cost me my home, but staying incapacitated a little longer will be the key to reclaiming everything they tried to steal. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The accident itself remains a blur of shattered glass and twisted metal. I remember the screech of tires, the horrifying sensation of my car rolling down the embankment, and then nothing but fragments of consciousness between surgeries and medication. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a fractured femur, and a severe concussion that kept me drifting in and out of awareness for days. The doctors called it a miracle that I survived it all. Ethan was there when I first properly regained consciousness 2 weeks ago. His handsome face a picture of concern, his blue eyes pooling with what I then believed were genuine tears of relief. He clutched my hand, whispered how much he loved me, how terrified he'd been of losing me. His performance was flawless, and I, still hazy from medication and trauma, drank in his concern like a withering plant finally given water. "Everything's taken care of," he assured me between gentle kisses to my forehead. "The house, the bills, work. Just focus on getting better, Madeline." I believed him. After 5 years together and a year-long engagement, why wouldn't I? Ethan had always been the organized one, the planner who kept our lives running smoothly while I built my career as an interior designer. His thoughtfulness was one of the reasons I'd fallen in love with him. One of the reasons I'd agreed when he suggested we move into my late grandmother's Victorian home in Oak Ridge Heights, a heritage property I'd inherited just before we met. The first sign that something was amiss came 3 days ago when my best friend Naomi finally returned from her business trip abroad. She'd rushed to the hospital, laden with flowers and a stuffed bear, her face a complicated mixture of relief and something else, something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. "You should be out of here soon," she said after hugging me carefully, around my healing ribs. "Dr. Patel said your recovery is going remarkably well." "Another week, probably," I confirmed, noticing how she avoided direct eye contact. "I can't wait to get back home. Hospital beds aren't exactly designed for comfort." A flicker of something, panic, crossed her features. "About that," she began, then stopped abruptly as a nurse entered to check my vitals. When we were alone again, Naomi fidgeted with the wrapper from her coffee cup. "Ethan's been handling everything with the house?" The question seemed oddly phrased, more statement than inquiry, with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. "Of course," I replied, watching her closely. "Why wouldn't he be?" "No reason," she said too quickly. I haven't been by there since I got back. Wanted to make sure everything was okay." The conversation moved on, but that strange moment lingered in my mind long after Naomi left. That night, when Ethan visited with his usual bouquet of lilies, my second favorite flower, though I'd reminded him countless times that I preferred daisies, I studied him with new awareness. The slightly rumpled collar of his shirt, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume, the way his phone remained face down on the nightstand, vibrating occasionally with messages he was conspicuously not checking in my presence. "How's the house?" I asked casually, reaching for the water cup on my tray. "Everything still standing?" "Perfect," he said, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. "I've been keeping everything just as you left it." "And the garden? Grandmother's roses need regular care." His smile faltered for just a millisecond. "Looking beautiful. Mrs. Winters from next door has been helping with those." The lie slid from his lips with practiced ease. Mrs. Winters had moved to Florida 3 months ago to live with her daughter. I'd helped her pack, That's so kind of her, I replied, matching his deception with my own. Please thank her for me. That night, after Ethan left with a theatrical display of reluctance, I made my first move. Using the phone Naomi had smuggled to me, my own having been destroyed in the crash, I called Diana Powell, my grandmother's longtime friend and the real estate attorney who had handled her estate. Madeline, darling, Diana's warm voice filled the line. I've been meaning to visit. How are you recovering? Better than everyone thinks, I replied carefully. Diana, I need you to check something for me without anyone knowing, especially Ethan. A pause. Is everything all right? I'm not sure, I admitted. But I need to see the original deed to grandmother's house, the complete version with all clauses and conditions. I have copies in my files, she said, her tone shifting from warm to professionally crisp. May I ask why the sudden interest? Just a feeling, I answered. A feeling that someone might be taking advantage of my situation. Diana's silence spoke volumes. When she finally responded, her voice was measured. I'll bring the documents tomorrow, and Madeline? Your grandmother was a very shrewd woman who trusted very few people completely. Remember that. The next morning, before Ethan's usual visit, Diana arrived with a leather portfolio tucked discreetly under her arm. After brief pleasantries and a careful hug, she extracted a thick document and placed it on my lap. Page 7, paragraph 3, she said quietly. And page 12, the special addendum. As I read, a cold clarity washed over me. Grandmother's. Deed contained a rarely used but legally binding occupancy clause. The property could only be inhabited by direct descendants of the Harlow family or their legal spouses. Not fiancés, not girlfriends, not friends. The moment Ethan moved another woman into the house, he had violated the terms that protected my inheritance. The second document was even more illuminating. A trust provision that gave the property additional protection against unauthorized occupancy. Any non-family member living in the house without the legal owner's explicit documented permission was not only trespassing but potentially liable for significant financial penalties. He doesn't know, does he? I asked Diana, whose thin smile confirmed my suspicion. Your grandmother instructed me to explain these provisions only to her direct heirs, Diana replied. When you inherited, we discussed them, but you were grieving. I'm not surprised you might have forgotten some details. I hadn't forgotten. I simply hadn't imagined I would ever need such protections against the man I planned to marry. There's something else you should know, Diana said, her voice dropping further. Rachel from my office lives 3 houses down from you. She mentioned seeing Ethan with a woman, not you, coming and going freely for the past month, looking quite domestic. The confirmation stung, despite my growing suspicions. A month? But I've only been in the hospital for 6 weeks. Diana's expression softened with sympathy. Which means this likely started before your accident, dear. As this revelation settled over me, a plan began to form. A plan that would require patience, careful timing, and the strategic use of both my medical condition and my grandmother's legal foresight. I need your help, I told Diana, my voice steadier than I expected. And I need you to find me a very specific kind of lawyer. Diana's eyes gleamed with something between approval and anticipation. I believe I know exactly the person. What else do you need? Information, I replied, feeling a strange calm replace my initial shock and hurt. Everything you can discover about who this woman is, how long this has been going on, and what they've been doing in my house. As Diana made notes, I glanced at the deed again, running my finger over my grandmother's signature. The same grandmother who had always told me, trust but verify, and always have an escape route. I had trusted. I had failed to verify. But thanks to her foresight, I still had an escape route, one that would lead me back to what was mine, while leading Ethan and his girlfriend straight into a trap of their own making. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When Dr. Patel arrived for his morning rounds, I made a decision that would set everything in motion. "How much longer until I'm officially ready for discharge?" I asked him. "Physically, I could release you in 3 days," he replied, reviewing my chart. "Your recovery has been exceptional." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in days. "Let's keep that between us for now. As far as anyone else is concerned, especially my fiancé, I still need at least 2 more weeks of care." Dr. Patel raised an eyebrow but didn't question my request. He'd been in medicine long enough to recognize when a patient needed more than physical healing. "Of course, Ms. Harlow. Patient confidentiality is absolute." As he left, I settled back against my pillows, no longer feeling trapped by my hospital bed, but seeing it instead as the perfect vantage point from which to observe, plan, and prepare. Ethan and his girlfriend thought they had all the time in the world to enjoy my home, spending my inheritance, sleeping in my grandmother's meticulously restored master bedroom. They had no idea that every day they spent getting comfortable was another day I spent building the case that would eventually evict them not just from my property, but from my life, leaving them with nothing but the consequences of their betrayal. The nurse entered to adjust my IV, commenting on my improved color. "Feeling better?" she asked kindly. "Much better," I replied, thinking not of my healing bones but of the claws that would soon become my greatest weapon. "I think things are finally looking up." The moment of absolute clarity came not from Ethan's suspicious behavior or Diana's revelations, but from an accidental phone call. 2 days after discovering the occupancy clause in my grandmother's deed, I was drifting in and out of a light afternoon nap when my hospital room phone rang. "Hello?" I answered, voice deliberately weak and raspy, the voice Ethan had come to expect. Silence greeted me, followed by the unmistakable sound of a sharp intake of breath. Then, muffled but clear enough, hang up. You called her hospital room." Female, young, panicked. In the background, I heard Ethan's voice, urgent and annoyed. "Give me the phone, Vanessa!" A fumbling sound, then the decisive click of the call ending. I held the receiver in my hand long after the line went dead, a strange calm settling over me like frost. Vanessa. His betrayal now had a name, a voice. The hospital room that had felt like a prison suddenly became a sanctuary, a place where I could think, plan, and observe without being observed. For the first time since awakening from my post-accident haze, I was grateful for the sterile walls and the distance they provided from what had once been my life. When Nurse Marjorie came in for my afternoon check, she found me sitting straighter, eyes clear and focused. "You're looking much better today," she commented, checking my IV. "I feel more awake," I replied carefully. "Like I'm finally seeing things clearly." She smiled warmly, misinterpreting my meaning. "That's the healing process for you. How's the pain today?" "Manageable," I said truthfully. The physical pain had indeed receded to a dull ache, easily overshadowed by the sharp clarity of betrayal. After she left, I reached for the notebook Diana had brought me, labeled innocuously as Recovery Journal for any prying eyes. Inside, I began documenting everything: the call, the name Vanessa, the timing of Ethan's visits, the inconsistencies in his stories about the house. Each detail became another piece of evidence, another strand in the web I was beginning to weave. That evening, Ethan arrived with his usual practiced concern and a new bouquet. Roses this time, which I'd told him more than once reminded me of funerals. His eyes darted nervously around the room as he entered, scanning for signs that I might have somehow learned about his Vanessa. I watched him through half-lowered lids, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "How's my fighter doing today?" he asked, his voice carrying that perfect note of worried affection. "Tired," I murmured. "The doctors say recovery is going slower than they hoped." A flicker of something. Relief? Crossed his features before he composed them into a frown of concern. "That's disappointing. Any new timeline for coming home?" I noticed how he said coming home instead of getting out, as if my return to our shared space was his primary concern, not my health. Of course it was. Every day I remained in the hospital was another day he and Vanessa could play house without consequence. "At least 2 more weeks," I said, injecting just enough disappointment into my voice. "Maybe longer. They're worried about potential complications with my lung." He nodded, patting my hand with what appeared to be sympathy but felt like anticipation. "Whatever it takes to get you properly healed. No rushing." "How's everything at home?" I asked, watching him carefully. "Still keeping up with grandmother's antiques? You know how particular I am about the Chippendale secretary in the study." "Everything's exactly as you left it," he assured me, the lie flowing smoothly. "I've been careful not to disturb anything." I wanted to laugh. The Chippendale secretary had been sold 3 years ago to fund the kitchen renovation. If he'd set foot in the study even once since moving Vanessa in, he'd have known that. "That's a relief," I said instead. "And you're sleeping okay?" "I know. How you hate being alone in that big house." His eyes flickered away for just a moment, a tell I'd noticed throughout our relationship whenever he was constructing rather than recalling. "It's been hard without you. The house feels empty." I imagined it felt anything but empty, with Vanessa filling the spaces I'd left behind. As he continued weaving his fabrications, my phone, hidden beneath my blanket, vibrated with an incoming message. "Diana, right on schedule. Found her. Vanessa Miller, 26, paralegal at Kincaid and Wong. Started at Ethan's firm 8 months ago. More photos coming. 8 months. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. My accident had happened 6 weeks ago, which meant their affair had been going on for at least half a year before I'd ended up in the hospital. How many nights had he come home to me after being with her? How many times had he kissed me goodbye in the morning, knowing he would see her at work? I maintained my mask of oblivious vulnerability as Ethan continued his performance, but internally, something hardened. This wasn't just opportunistic betrayal, taking advantage of my accident to move his girlfriend in. This was calculated deception that predated my injuries. The accident had simply provided convenient cover for what he'd already been doing. After 20 minutes of his carefully curated update about work, mutual friends, and household matters, all filtered to exclude any mention of Vanessa, Ethan checked his watch with a practiced casualness. "I should let you rest," he said, standing to kiss my forehead. "Partner's dinner tonight. Boring work stuff." "On a Tuesday?" I asked innocently. The firm's partner dinners had always been on Thursdays, a detail I'd learned after 5 years of Ethan's schedule. He barely missed a beat. "Special strategy session, end of quarter planning." I nodded weakly, playing my role. "Of course. Don't worry about me. Just another exciting night of hospital TV." After he left, I immediately texted Diana. "He just left for a partner's dinner. Can you have someone confirm if there's actually a work event tonight?" Her reply came minutes later. "On it." I spent the next hour reviewing my notes and considering my next steps. The occupancy clause in the deed was my strongest weapon, but I needed more than legal leverage. I needed to understand the full scope of their deception, needed documentation of exactly what they were doing in my house. Most importantly, I needed to control the timing of my eventual return, an advantage I could only maintain by keeping my improved condition secret. When my phone vibrated again, it wasn't Diana, but Naomi. "We need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow morning before work?" I hesitated before responding. Naomi had been acting strange during her visit, and now I wondered if she knew more than she'd let on. Could she have been aware of Ethan's affair? Had she kept it from me out of misguided loyalty or protection? 8 a.m. works. Bring coffee. Real coffee, not the hospital sludge. Her response was immediate. Deal. And Maddie, I'm so sorry. The apology confirmed my suspicions. Naomi knew something, perhaps everything. Tomorrow, I would discover exactly how deep the betrayal went and who else had been complicit in keeping me in the dark. Later that evening, Diana sent what she'd promised. Photographs taken discreetly by her paralegal who lived in my neighborhood. Images of Ethan and a slender woman with copper hair entering my home, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. Another of them unloading groceries from his car, laughing in my driveway. The most jarring, the two of them in my garden, her wearing what was unmistakably one of my sundresses as she pruned my grandmother's prized roses. The final message from Diana provided the closing piece. No partner's dinner tonight. Confirmed. With 3 separate sources at the firm. Regular Tuesday, offices closed at 6 p.m. I saved each photograph, each message, each piece of evidence in a secure cloud folder Diana had created. Then I sent one last text before settling in for the night. Is it possible to install security cameras without entering the house? I need to see what's happening inside. Diana's response was exactly what I needed. My nephew's security company can do it remotely if you have smart home features, which, thanks to your renovation last year, you do. Give me the green light, and we can have eyes inside by tomorrow night. I texted back immediately, green light. Every room except bathrooms. I want to see everything. As I set my phone aside, a strange sense of empowerment replaced the initial shock and hurt of discovery. Each lie Ethan told, each night he spent, with Vanessa in my home, each moment they believed they were getting away with their deception. All of it was merely evidence accumulating, the noose of consequence tightening around them while they remained blissfully unaware. Tomorrow would bring Naomi's confession, security footage, and perhaps more revelations about the depth of their betrayal. But rather than dreading these discoveries, I found myself almost eager for them. Knowledge, after all, was power. And, in the game they didn't yet realize we were playing, I was accumulating power by the hour. I adjusted my hospital bed to a more comfortable position and closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to plan my next moves. The most important performance of my life was just beginning, and I intended to make sure that when the final act came, the applause would be mine alone. Naomi arrived precisely at 8 the next morning, bearing not just coffee but also a pastry bag from Madeline's, our favorite bakery since college. Her face was drawn, eyes rimmed with the telltale redness of a night spent crying. She hesitated at the doorway before stepping into the room, as if crossing an invisible boundary into confession territory. "You know," she said. Not a question. I accepted the coffee, inhaling the rich aroma of properly brewed beans, a small luxury after weeks of hospital provisions. Not everything, but enough. She pulled a chair close to my bed, perching on its edge like she might need to flee at any moment. "How did you find out?" "Does it matter?" I took a careful sip, maintaining eye contact. "What matters is how long you've known and why you didn't tell me." Naomi's shoulders slumped. She reached into her purse and withdrew her phone, scrolling until she found what she was looking for before handing it to me. On the screen was a text conversation dated 3 months ago, well before my accident. N. "Are you sure about what you saw?" Kira. "Positive. Ethan plus redhead, full makeout session in his car outside Riverview Apartments. Wasn't even trying to hide." N. "Maybe it wasn't him. Could have been someone who looks similar." Kira. "It was your bestie's fiancé. I've met him at least 10 times at your parties. Unless he has an identical twin, it was him. What are you going to tell Maddie?" The conversation continued, with Naomi clearly struggling with how to handle the information, ultimately deciding to confront Ethan first. I scrolled further, finding another exchange from a week later. N. I talked to E. He swore it was a mistake, one-time thing, said he'd end it immediately. Made me promise not to tell M, said it would just hurt her for no reason. Kira. And you believed him? Men like that don't change. N. What was I supposed to do? If it really was just once, telling her would destroy everything for nothing. I handed the phone back, a cold weight settling in my stomach. So you confronted him. He lied, and you chose to believe him. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to believe him, for your sake. When I left for London, I thought it was over. She wiped at her cheeks. Then I got back, heard about your accident, and discovered he'd moved her into my house while I was fighting for my life, I finished flatly. She nodded miserably. I drove by 2 days ago. Her car was in the driveway. I recognized her from social media, the same woman Kira had seen. I was trying to figure out how to tell you when I visited. I studied her. This friend of 15 years who had kept such a significant betrayal from me. Part of me wanted to lash out, to demand why she hadn't trusted me with the truth from the beginning. But anger wouldn't serve my purposes now. Information would. Tell me everything you know about her, I said instead, reaching for my notebook. Relief flooded Naomi's face at not being immediately cast out. Her name is Vanessa Miller. She's a paralegal who started at Lambert and Pierce about 8 months ago. According to Kira, she and Ethan were seen together at office happy hours almost immediately. Social media? I asked, making notes. Instagram and Facebook. She's not private. Apparently doesn't think she needs to be. Naomi reached for her phone again, pulling up Vanessa's profiles. She hasn't posted any photos of your house yet, but there are several of her and Ethan from the last few months. Always geotagged away from your neighborhood. I scrolled through the images. Ethan and Vanessa at restaurants, hiking trails, a weekend trip to the coast, places he'd told me he was working, visiting a college friend, attending conferences. In several photos, Vanessa wore jewelry I recognized, pieces I'd thought were lost in our most recent move. This was dated 2 weeks before my accident, I said, pointing to a photo of them at a vineyard, Vanessa sporting my mother's vintage opal earrings. He told me he was at a continuing education seminar. Naomi nodded. He's been playing both sides for months, after your accident. She hesitated. Go on. After your accident, I think he saw an opportunity. With you in the hospital, he could have her over without sneaking around. When your recovery took longer than expected, he got bolder. The puzzle pieces were fitting together. Not just what Ethan had done, but the calculated opportunism behind it. My accident hadn't caused his betrayal. It had merely accelerated his timeline and emboldened his actions. There's something else, Naomi said, her voice dropping. Yesterday at Black Plum Cafe, I overheard Vanessa talking with another woman. She mentioned plans to redecorate once things are official. And she called your grandmother's house our future home. The presumption stung more than I expected. Did she now? They don't just plan to continue the affair, Maddie. I think they're planning for him to end things with you once you're better. Maybe even... She trailed off. Maybe even suggest, I sell the house since it would have too many stairs for my recovery. I finished, the scenario playing out clearly in my mind. Split the proceeds with his soon-to-be ex-fiancé as a consolation prize, while he and Vanessa find a place better, suited to start fresh. Naomi's eyes widened. That's exactly what it sounded like. I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face after weeks of performed weakness. Except they don't know about the occupancy clause, or that I'm much further along in my recovery than Ethan thinks. What are you planning? Naomi asked, a hint of worry creeping into her voice. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated with a notification from Diana. Security installation complete. Access credentials in your email. All areas operational except master bath where signal was blocked. Perfect timing. I'm planning to gather evidence, I told Naomi, turning my phone to show her the security app now installing. And you're going to help me. Her expression shifted from concern to determination. Tell me what you need. For the next hour, we developed a strategy. Naomi would visit the house tomorrow, ostensibly to pick up some clothing and personal items I'd requested. During her visit, she would casually mention that my doctors were now discussing potential long-term care options, suggesting my return home might be months away, rather than weeks. Plant the seed that they have even more time, I explained. Make them comfortable enough to get careless. And the security cameras? We'll capture everything. Their conversations when they think no one's listening, any plans they're making, and most importantly, evidence of them living in my house without authorization. Naomi nodded, then asked the question I'd been waiting for. What about the occupancy clause? What exactly does it say? I explained the details Diana had shown me, how my grandmother had protected the property from non-family inhabitants, the potential financial penalties, the absolute right of the Harlow heir to evict unauthorized occupants with minimal notice. Your grandmother was a genius, Naomi breathed. She was cautious, I corrected. She'd lived through her own betrayals and made sure her descendants wouldn't suffer the same fate. I just never thought I'd need her protections. As Naomi prepared to leave, she paused at the door. I should have told you the moment Kira saw them together. I'm so sorry, Maddie. You're making up for it now, I said, softening slightly. But from this point on, complete honesty between us. I need to know everything, no matter how painful. After she left, I opened my email to find the security credentials Diana had promised. Within minutes, I was watching live feeds from various rooms in my own home, the home where I'd planned to build a future with Ethan, where we'd talked about raising children someday. The house was empty at present, both Ethan and Vanessa presumably at work, but signs of their cohabitation were everywhere. Unfamiliar throw pillows on my couch, wine glasses on the coffee table, a jacket that wasn't mine draped over a kitchen chair. I switched to the master bedroom view, my breath catching at the transformation. My carefully chosen linens had been replaced with a bold geometric print I would never select. Vanessa's clothing hung in my open closet. On my vintage vanity sat an array of cosmetics and hair products, arranged where my own things had once been. They hadn't just moved in. They had begun to erase me. As I continued my virtual tour of what had once been exclusively my space, I noticed movement on the front porch camera. A delivery person approached with a large package. The label was clearly visible. Restoration Hardware. I switched to the living room feed and waited. 30 minutes later, Vanessa entered through the front door. Business attire exchanged for casual leggings and a sweatshirt. My sweatshirt from my alma mater. She signed for the package with practiced ease, directing the delivery people where to place it. Just in the living room is fine. Her voice came through clearly. My boyfriend will help me unpack it later. Boyfriend, not my boyfriend's fiancé's furniture. Not furniture for the house I'm staying in temporarily. The casual ownership in her tone made my decision even easier. I texted Diana. I want to proceed with all legal preparations, and I need you to find me a locksmith who can work discreetly and quickly when the time comes. Her response was immediate. Already have both on standby. Just say when. The when would require perfect timing. I needed enough evidence to make my case airtight, enough documentation to ensure there could be no defense against what they'd done. As Dr. Patel arrived for his afternoon rounds, I made my decision. I'd like to discuss discharge planning, I told him. But I need absolute confidentiality about my timeline. Can you help me with that? He studied me thoughtfully before nodding. I believe I understand. How long do you need? I thought of the growing evidence, of Ethan and Vanessa making themselves at home in my space, of the legal preparations Diana was assembling. 1 week, I decided. I need 1 more week to get everything in order. Dr. Patel made a notation in my chart. Then, as far as anyone outside this room knows, your recovery has hit a minor setback. I'll adjust your treatment plan accordingly. As he left, I returned to the security feeds, watching as Vanessa began unpacking what appeared to be an expensive new coffee table, clearly intended to replace the antique my grandmother had cherished. The final replacement of me in what was supposed to be our home. Let them decorate, I thought. Let them nest and plan and imagine their future in my house. Their comfort would make the eventual reckoning all the more satisfying. The live stream from my home became both my torment and my ammunition. For 3 days, I watched Ethan and Vanessa move through spaces that had once been mine alone, witnessed their casual intimacy in my kitchen, their laughter in my garden, their bodies intertwined on my couch. Each moment was meticulously recorded, categorized, and added to my growing collection of evidence. But it was on the 4th day that I discovered the true extent of their betrayal, and it went far beyond romantic infidelity. Diana arrived for her daily visit, this time accompanied by a thin, serious man with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful manner of someone accustomed to delivering unwelcome news. "Madeline, this is Howard Bryce," she introduced him. "The forensic accountant I mentioned." I shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip. "You found something?" It wasn't a question. Diana wouldn't have brought him otherwise. Howard placed his leather portfolio on the tray table and extracted several documents. "We began by examining your joint accounts, as you requested. There's been unusual activity over the past 4 months, well before your accident." He pointed to highlighted transactions, systematic withdrawals from our joint savings, initially small but growing progressively larger. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Credit card charges for restaurants and hotels I'd never visited. "The total diversion amounts to approximately $42,000, Howard stated clinically. "Additionally, there have been 3 significant withdrawals. From your personal inheritance account since your hospitalization, funds that your grandmother left specifically to you." My throat tightened. "How much?" $75,000 in total. The withdrawal slips bear your signature, or what appears to be your signature. I stared at the photocopied slips he produced. The signature resembled mine, but contained subtle differences. The loop of the M too rounded, the tail of the E too pronounced. "That's not my handwriting," I said quietly. Diana nodded. "We didn't think so. The bank should have required additional verification for withdrawals of that size, especially from an account with a sole signatory." "Who processed these transactions?" I asked. Howard consulted his notes. "A teller named Bailey Wilson at the Oak Ridge Heights branch. According to our sources, Ms. Wilson is a recent hire, approximately 7 months with the bank." The timing aligned perfectly with Ethan's affair. Let me guess. She's about my height, similar build, possibly wore a scarf or high-collared outfit during these transactions. Diana and Howard exchanged glances. "How did you know?" Diana asked. "Because Ethan has my driver's license." The realization crystallized, with perfect clarity. "I couldn't find it after the accident. He told me it was probably lost in the crash or taken by the emergency responders for identification." Howard removed his glasses, polishing them with a microfiber cloth. "If someone presented your ID along with a reasonable forgery of your signature, and the teller wasn't familiar with me personally," I continued, "they might process the transaction without additional questions." "Precisely," Howard confirmed. "Especially if the person withdrawing the funds knew details about your account, like your grandmother's name or when the inheritance was received. Information Ethan would have, having been with me during the probate process after my grandmother's death." I turned to Diana, a new urgency in my voice. "This changes things. This isn't just about the house anymore. This is fraud. She nodded, grimly. Financial exploitation of an incapacitated person. Identity theft, forgery, potentially conspiracy if we can prove Vanessa was involved in the bank transactions. My mind raced through the implications. Ethan hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he was systematically looting my finances while I was hospitalized. The occupancy clause in my grandmother's deed now seemed almost secondary compared to the criminal charges these financial revelations might support. Can we track where the money went? I asked Howard. We're already working on it. Preliminary traces show transfers to an offshore account recently established in the Cayman Islands. The account holder is listed as Windward Ventures LLC, a shell company incorporated 2 months ago. 2 months ago. While I was still unconscious, fighting for my life after the accident. The timeline of their betrayal was expanding, reaching back further into our relationship and extending beyond simple infidelity into calculated financial predation. Had the accident been convenient timing for plans already in motion, or had it accelerated a scheme they were still developing? A chilling thought occurred to me. Howard, I need you to look into something else. The accident itself. Diana's eyebrows rose. You think it wasn't an accident? I hesitated, not wanting to sound paranoid but unable to ignore the disturbing pattern emerging. My brakes failed on a road I drove almost daily. The mechanic who inspected my car 2 weeks before the accident was someone Ethan recommended, a friend of a colleague, he said. Howard made a note. I'll look into the mechanic and the insurance claim. If there's anything irregular, we'll find it. As they prepared to leave, Diana handed me a business card. This is Lynn Mercer, the attorney I mentioned who specializes in cases like yours. She's expecting your call. I tucked the card beneath my pillow. Thank you both, for believing me, for helping me. After they departed, I returned to the security feeds from my house, viewing them with new eyes. What had seemed like mere emotional betrayal now appeared potentially more sinister. Had they planned all of this? Was my accident a convenient opportunity, or something they had engineered? That evening, Ethan arrived for his regular visit. His performance as the devoted fiancé flawless as ever. He brought fresh flowers and a bag from my favorite bookstore. I got you that historical novel you mentioned wanting to read, he said, placing it on my bedside table with practiced thoughtfulness. I hadn't mentioned any such book. Another small slip in his carefully constructed facade of attentiveness. How thoughtful, I murmured, watching as he checked his phone surreptitiously. Everything okay at work? Just busy, he replied smoothly. End of quarter pressure. I nodded sympathetically. And the house? Everything still in order? A barely perceptible tension appeared around his eyes. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? No reason, I said, injecting just enough weariness into my voice. I just miss it. Dr. Patel mentioned my recovery might take longer than we initially thought. Something about potential complications with the lung tissue. The flash of calculation that crossed his face was unmistakable, quickly masked by concern. How much longer? At least another month, maybe more, I lied. They're being cautious. He squeezed my hand, his relief poorly disguised as support. Whatever it takes to get you properly healed. I'll handle everything at home. I'm sure you will, I thought, even as I smiled gratefully at him. After he left, I accessed the security feed from my phone. As I expected, the moment he entered, the house. His concerned expression melted away, replaced by animated excitement as he called out to Vanessa. Great news. His voice came through the speakers clearly. She'll be in the hospital at least another month, maybe longer. Vanessa appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, my grandmother's hand-embroidered dish towel. Did she suspect anything? Not a thing, Ethan assured her, crossing to plant a kiss on her lips. She's completely in the dark. The doctor said there might be complications. Perfect timing, Vanessa replied, a smile spreading across her face. The architect is coming tomorrow about the renovation plans, and that realtor friend of mine thinks we could list this place for at least 20% above market value once we modernize a few key areas. My breath caught. Renovation plans? Listing the house? Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Ethan cautioned, though he didn't seem particularly opposed to the idea. One step at a time. First, we need to secure the rest of her inheritance funds. The sooner we can move that offshore, the better. They moved into the living room, out of the kitchen camera's range, but their voices still carried. Bailey said she can process one more withdrawal before it triggers a supervisory review, Vanessa was saying. After that, we'll need to find another method. By then it won't matter, Ethan replied confidently. Once we have the funds secured, we can move forward with the next phase. Sometimes I think the accident was the best thing that could have happened for our timeline. Their casual discussion of my finances, my future, and the convenient timing of my near-death experience sent ice through my veins. This wasn't opportunistic betrayal. This was a coordinated plan that had been developing for months. I immediately called Diana, my voice steady despite the shock. I need an emergency meeting with Lynn Mercer, tomorrow, and tell Howard to expedite the investigation into the accident. I think they might have planned it. The next morning, I received another visitor, unexpected but not unwelcome. Officer Teresa Reyes of the Oak Ridge Heights Police Department, badge displayed on her belt, expression professionally neutral. Ms. Harlow, I understand you've discovered some potentially criminal activity regarding your accounts while you've been hospitalized. Diana had moved faster than I anticipated. As Teresa settled into the visitor's chair, notepad ready, I realized that the confrontation I'd been meticulously planning was accelerating beyond my control. The legal machinery was now in motion, and the stakes had risen dramatically. What had begun as a simple case of a cheating fiancé had evolved into something far more dangerous, and my strategy would need to evolve with it. Officer Reyes's visit marked the beginning of my double life. To the medical staff, I remained a recovering patient, progressing steadily but still requiring care. To Ethan, I was the vulnerable fiancé, conveniently confined and oblivious to his schemes. But behind this facade of fragility, I had become the center of an increasingly complex investigation. We've frozen the offshore account, Lynn Mercer informed me during our hastily arranged meeting the day after Officer Reyes's visit. Unlike Diana's warmth or Howard's analytical detachment, Lynn radiated controlled intensity, a predator assessing the most efficient path to her prey. How much were they able to transfer? I asked. Approximately 60,000 so far, Lynn replied, consulting her tablet. The remaining funds are still traceable, though they attempted to route them through several shell companies. Diana, seated beside Lynn, added, Howard's team found something else. Vanessa Miller isn't just Ethan's paralegal girlfriend. She previously worked for Sentinel Financial Advisors under her maiden name, Vanessa Keller. The name meant nothing to me. Should that be significant? Sentinel was investigated 3 years ago for elder financial abuse, Lynn explained. Several clients had their accounts systematically drained through a series of seemingly legitimate transactions. Vanessa was never formally charged, but she left the firm immediately before the investigation went public. The pieces aligned with disturbing precision. So she has experience with this kind of fraud. And she's apparently found a willing partner in Ethan, Diana concluded grimly. My hospital room had transformed into an impromptu command center. Between medical staff rounds, a rotating cast of legal professionals, financial investigators, and police officers filtered through, each bringing new pieces to the expanding puzzle of Ethan and Vanessa's scheme. The evidence mounted daily. Documentation of forged signatures, bank camera footage showing Vanessa wearing a wig remarkably similar to my hair color and style while withdrawing funds, phone records revealing hundreds of calls between Ethan and Vanessa dating back nearly a year. Most disturbing was the information Howard's team uncovered about my accident. The mechanic who had inspected my car 2 weeks prior, the one Ethan had so helpfully recommended, had a history of insurance fraud allegations and a cousin who worked at Ethan's law firm. The brake line that had failed showed signs of tampering that the initial investigation had attributed to accident damage. "It's not conclusive," Officer Reyes cautioned during one of her updates, "but it's enough to justify a more thorough investigation." The dual nature of my existence became increasingly surreal. In the mornings, I would participate in physical therapy sessions, now genuinely helpful as my strength returned, while discussing potential criminal charges against my fiancé with Detective Larson, who had joined the case as the financial crimes aspect expanded. In the afternoons, I would pretend exhaustion and fragility during Ethan's visits, feeding him false information about prolonged recovery times while secretly recording every conversation for the investigation. In the evenings, I would watch through security cameras as Ethan and Vanessa continued their life in my home, planning renovations, discussing offshore banking options, and occasionally mentioning my accident in ways that stopped just short of explicit confession but carried unsettling implications. "You worry too much," Vanessa told Ethan one evening as they shared wine in my kitchen. "The accident investigation was closed months ago. Nobody's going to re-examine a simple brake failure on a 10-year-old car. I just want to be certain everything's properly handled," Ethan replied. "We've come too far to get sloppy now." These snippets, while not definitively incriminating, added to the mounting circumstantial evidence that my accident might have been orchestrated, a convenient solution to accessing my inheritance while removing the obstacle of my presence. Dr. Patel, now aware of the broader situation, became an unexpected ally. "Your physical recovery has progressed remarkably," he noted during a private examination. "Medically speaking, you could be discharged within days." "I need a bit more time," I told him, "just until all the pieces are in place." He nodded understanding. "I can justify continued observation for another week based on your lung function tests. Beyond that, we'd be veering into ethical gray areas." "A week should be sufficient," I assured him, hoping it was true. The most challenging aspect of my double life wasn't the physical toll of recovery or the emotional strain of betrayal. It was maintaining the fragile balance between patient and investigator, between apparent victim and actual orchestrator of what was to come. Naomi became my most frequent visitor and my connection to the world outside my medical and legal cocoon. She brought clothes, personal items, and, most valuably, observations about Ethan's behavior when he thought no one was watching. "He's meeting with contractors at the house," she reported during one visit. "They were measuring the kitchen and discussing removing walls when I stopped by to pick up those books you requested. Did he seem suspicious about why you were there?" "Not at all. He's completely confident you're in the dark. He even asked me to tell you he's having the house deep cleaned for your eventual return. His explanation for why things might look different." My smile held no warmth. Thoughtful of him. The contractors were concerning, not just for what they represented regarding Ethan's plans for my home, but for the potential destruction of evidence. I immediately alerted Lynn, who arranged for an emergency court order restricting any structural changes to the property based on the ongoing investigation. "The order will be delivered tomorrow," she informed me. It doesn't explicitly mention the fraud investigation, just cites code compliance concerns based on the home's historic status. It should buy us time without tipping our hand. 7 days into our covert operation, Howard brought the most damning evidence yet: documentation of a life insurance policy Ethan had taken out on me 6 months before the accident. A policy that listed him as the sole beneficiary to the tune of $1 million. "The application includes medical information that appears to have been falsified," Howard explained, pointing to discrepancies in the documents. "Your family history of heart conditions was significantly exaggerated. The policy has an accelerated payout clause for accidental death that doubles the benefit." The coldness of this discovery, the calculated financial value Ethan had placed on my death, crystallized. Something within me. This wasn't just about reclaiming my house or even seeking justice for financial fraud. This had become a fight for my very existence against someone who had quite literally tried to profit from my demise. That night, alone in my hospital room, I made a decision. The dual life I'd been leading, patient and investigator, victim and strategist, needed to converge into a single, decisive action. The legal machinery was moving, evidence accumulating, but Ethan and Vanessa remained free. In my home, spending my money, planning my property's transformation, and potentially plotting further harm if they discovered I was onto them. I called Diana at an hour most attorneys would consider unconscionable. "I want to go home," I told her without preamble. "Not in a week, not after more evidence gathering, tomorrow." Her pause conveyed surprise, but not disapproval. "Are you certain? The police investigation has enough to proceed regardless of what happens next," I finished. "But this isn't just about criminal charges anymore, Diana. It's about reclaiming what's mine, on my terms, not theirs." Another pause, longer this time. "I understand. I'll make the arrangements, but Madeline, this changes the strategy considerably. Are you prepared for direct confrontation?" I thought of the security footage I'd watched for days. Ethan and Vanessa moving through my spaces, sleeping in my bed, planning my financial ruin while I supposedly languished in hospital, unaware and powerless. "I'm not just prepared," I answered, a new steadiness in my voice. "I'm looking forward to it." The following morning, Dr. Patel signed my discharge papers with minimal fanfare and considerable concern. "You understand this is against medical advice," he reminded me. "Your lung function is improved, but not fully normalized." "I understand," I assured him, "but some wounds can only heal at home." As Naomi arrived to collect me, Ethan having been told I needed additional tests that would keep me unavailable for visitors throughout the day, I took one last look at the hospital room that had been both prison and sanctuary. The time for playing patient was over. The time for reclaiming my life had begun. The drive home felt surreal, passing through familiar neighborhoods that somehow seemed altered, as if my perspective had fundamentally shifted during my hospital confinement. Naomi navigated the streets cautiously, occasionally glancing at me with poorly disguised concern. "They should both be at work," she said as we turned onto Maple Avenue, my grandmother's Victorian house now visible in the distance. According to their social media, Vanessa has a firm luncheon until 3, and Ethan's in court all day. "Perfect," I replied, checking my phone where Diana had sent confirmation that our team was in position. "That gives us plenty of time." As we pulled into the driveway, I noted the subtle changes to the exterior. Garden beds rearranged, new furniture on the wraparound porch, a mail holder I didn't recognize affixed beside the front door. Small claims of territory, visible even from the outside. Diana's car was already parked at the curb, and as we approached the front steps, she emerged from it accompanied by Lynn Mercer and a locksmith whose van was discreetly positioned down the street. "Everything's ready," Diana confirmed, embracing me carefully. "How are you feeling?" "Ready to end this," I answered, turning to face my home, a place I hadn't seen except through security cameras in nearly 2 months. The locksmith worked efficiently, changing all exterior locks while Lynn explained the legal paperwork she held. "The occupancy violation notice is prepared, along with the emergency restraining order based on the financial fraud evidence. Both will be served the moment they return." I nodded, ascending the porch steps with deliberate determination. Each movement felt like reclaiming territory, like drawing a line between what had been taken and what I was now seizing back. When the front door swung open, the full impact of their occupation hit me physically. The entryway, once decorated with my grandmother's antique mirror and console table, now featured modern pieces I'd never seen. The walls, previously adorned with family photographs in vintage frames, now displayed abstract prints in sleek black borders. "They've been busy," Naomi murmured, her hand supportive at my elbow. "Not as busy as we're about to be," I replied, moving deeper into what had once been entirely mine. The living room told a similar story of systematic replacement, my carefully curated furniture either relegated to corners or removed entirely, supplanted by contemporary pieces chosen with someone else's aesthetic. Vanessa's presence was everywhere: fashion magazines on the coffee table, an unfamiliar laptop charging on the sideboard, a yoga mat rolled in the corner. Most jarring was what they had kept: selective pieces of my grandmother's most valuable antiques, positioned like trophies among their modern additions. The Tiffany lamp that had been in my family for generations, the handcrafted chess table my grandfather had made, the Persian rug whose provenance dated back a century. "They've cherry-picked what has monetary value," I observed, running my hand along the chess table's inlaid surface. "Everything else is being systematically erased." Over the next hour, our team worked with practiced efficiency. The locksmith completed the exterior locks and began on interior rooms. A security specialist Diana had engaged swept for cameras or surveillance equipment Ethan might have installed, then verified our existing security system was properly recording everything for evidence purposes. A forensic team from the police department arrived discreetly, focusing on the home office where financial documents might be found. Officer Reyes supervised their work, occasionally updating me on their findings, including a folder of my personal documents hidden in Ethan's desk drawer containing my birth certificate, passport, and several financial statements. "Classic identity theft preparation," she noted, sealing the items as evidence. They were likely planning to access more accounts using these. While the professionals worked, I moved through my home in a state of controlled fury, cataloging each transgression, each casual appropriation of my life. The kitchen where new appliances had replaced my vintage ones. The guest bedroom transformed into a home gym with equipment I'd never purchased. The master bathroom where Vanessa's expensive toiletries had displaced my simpler products. Most egregious was the master bedroom. My most private space invaded not just by their presence, but by their complete disregard for what had been mine. The mattress I'd carefully selected for my back issues, replaced by a firmer model. The reading nook by the window, once filled with my books, now converted to a vanity station with Vanessa's makeup and jewelry displayed on my grandmother's antique dresser scarf. On that dresser, I found the final straw: my mother's jewelry box, its contents ransacked, several heirloom pieces missing. Inside the lid where a family photo had been secured for generations, Vanessa had taped a post-it note. "Ask E about selling the emerald set. Too old-fashioned?" The emerald set, my grandmother's wedding gift, meant to be passed down to my daughter someday. I carefully photographed the note in place before removing it, adding it to the evidence file Lynn was compiling. By midday, the transformation was complete. New locks secured every entry point. Legal notices were prepared by the front door, on Ethan's desk, and on the kitchen counter where they couldn't be missed. The police had collected significant additional evidence of financial fraud, identity theft preparation, and property conversion. "Are you certain you want to be here when they return?" Diana asked as our support team began to depart, leaving just her, Lynn, Officer Reyes, and Naomi with me. "We could handle this without you having to face them directly." I settled into my grandmother's wingback chair, one of the few pieces they hadn't dared to remove from the living room. "I need to see their faces," I explained. "Need them to see mine when they realize everything they thought they had secured is slipping through their fingers." Lynn checked her watch. "Based on the court schedule, Ethan's hearing should be wrapping up soon. We should expect him within the hour." Officer Reyes positioned herself discreetly in the kitchen, out of immediate sight from the entryway, but close enough to intervene if needed. Naomi took up a position by the bay window, tasked with alerting us to their arrival. The waiting should have been excruciating, but instead, I found it oddly calming. Each minute that passed was another minute, of reclamation, of settling back into spaces that had been mine all along. I moved through the rooms deliberately, touching furniture, adjusting items, leaving subtle signs of my return that they would notice only after the initial shock. In my home office, I found architectural drawings for a planned renovation. Walls to be removed, extensions to be added, all without my knowledge or consent. The casual presumption that my home was theirs to redesign crystallized my resolve beyond any lingering doubt. "Car pulling up," Naomi called from her watchpost. "It's Ethan." I returned to the wingback chair, arranging myself with deliberate casualness. Diana stood behind me, a physical embodiment of the legal arsenal we had assembled. Lynn remained at the dining table, documents arrayed before her like weapons on a rack. The sound of a key in the lock, the old key, now useless against the new tumblers, followed by confusion, then more determined jiggling of the handle. "It's not working," came Ethan's voice from outside, familiar yet somehow foreign after weeks of hearing it only in the context of his deception. A phone call would be next, I knew, probably to Vanessa, asking if she'd had trouble with the lock. Perhaps they would assume it had simply jammed or malfunctioned. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with his incoming call. I let it ring through, to voicemail, imagining his growing frustration outside. After a moment, the doorbell rang, tentative at first, then more insistent when no one answered. I nodded to Naomi, who moved to open the door, strategically positioning herself so Ethan wouldn't immediately see into the living room where I waited. "Naomi?" His voice registered surprise. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay with Maddie?" "Why don't you come in, Ethan?" she replied, her tone carefully neutral. "There's something you should see." The moment had arrived, the culmination of weeks of planning, evidence gathering, and strategic patience. As Ethan stepped across the threshold of what he had assumed was becoming his home, I prepared to show him just how catastrophically wrong he had been. The commitment to confront rather than retreat, to reclaim rather than relinquish, had brought me to this pivotal moment. There would be no turning back from what came next, for any of us. Ethan stood frozen in the entryway, his briefcase hanging limply from one hand as his eyes locked with mine across the living room. For a moment that stretched like taffy, silence reigned, a suspended animation where the full weight of realization hadn't quite landed. "Maddie!" His voice cracked on my name, genuine shock registering on his face. "What? How are you? Home?" I finished for him, my tone pleasantly conversational. "I've been discharged. Surprise." He took an instinctive step forward, then halted as he processed the additional people in the room. Diana standing protectively behind my chair, Lynn at the dining table with her documents, Naomi positioning herself between us. "I don't understand," he said, his lawyer's brain visibly scrambling to assess and adapt. "The doctor said you'd need at least another month. I just spoke with Dr. Warren yesterday." "Dr. Warren isn't my attending physician," I noted mildly. "Dr. Patel is, and he determined I was ready to come home." Ethan's face performed a remarkable series of calculations, transitioning from shock to confusion to the beginnings of comprehension that something had gone terribly wrong with his plans. "You should have called," he said, attempting to regain footing. "I would have prepared everything, made sure the house was ready for your recovery." "Oh, I can see exactly how you've been preparing the house," I replied, gesturing to the transformed living room. "Quite extensive preparations, in fact." A flush crept up his neck. "I can explain the furniture. It was just temporary, more supportive for your recovery. And I've been organizing your grandmother's things for safekeeping while the contractors—" "Save it, Ethan," I interrupted, my pleasant tone hardening. "We both know what you've been doing. The only question is how long you want to continue this performance before we move to the next act." His eyes darted between the faces in the room, landing on Diana with dawning recognition. "You've been talking to Diana?" Maddie, I don't know what she's told you, but legal matters can be complicated. Like the legal matter of moving your girlfriend into my house while I was hospitalized? I asked, watching him flinch at the direct hit. Or the legal matter of forging my signature to withdraw $75,000 from my inheritance account? Perhaps you meant the legal matter of taking out a fraudulent life insurance policy on me 6 months before my suspicious brake failure? Each question landed like a physical blow. I watched as his face drained of color, his attorney's composure crumbling beneath the avalanche of specific accusations. You've misunderstood, he stammered, before his legal training reasserted itself. I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present. Wise decision, Lynn interjected, rising from the dining table with practiced authority. Lynn Mercer, representing Ms. Harlow in this matter. You'll find these documents enlightening. She extended a folder containing the occupancy violation notice, restraining order, and formal notification of criminal investigation. Ethan didn't take it, his hands suddenly seeming unwilling to accept tangible evidence of his situation. This is ridiculous, he attempted, his voice straining for indignation, but achieving only desperation. Maddie, whatever you think happened isn't conjecture, I finished. It's documented fact. Every conversation you and Vanessa had in this house for the past 2 weeks is recorded. Every financial transaction is traced. Every text message, email, and phone call is cataloged. From the kitchen doorway, Officer Reyes stepped into view, her presence adding official weight to my words. Mr. Reynolds, we have some questions regarding potentially fraudulent financial transactions from Ms. Harlow's accounts. The last remnants of his composure collapsed. I want my lawyer, he repeated, reaching for his phone with trembling fingers. An excellent idea, I agreed. You'll need good representation. In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to read the occupancy clause in my grandmother's deed. The one specifically prohibiting non-family members from residing here without the owner's explicit written consent? The one carrying financial penalties of $1,000 per day of unauthorized occupancy? His eyes widened as he calculated the potential cost. Nearly $40,000 for Vanessa's unauthorized stay thus far. The locks have been changed, I continued, my voice steady. Your personal items are being packed by a bonded service and will be delivered to whatever address you provide. Any items belonging to Vanessa will receive similar treatment. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Naomi answered it to reveal 2 uniformed officers accompanying Detective Larson, who nodded professionally to Officer Reyes before turning his attention to Ethan. Mr. Reynolds, we have a warrant to seize electronic devices and financial documents related to our investigation. I'd ask that you surrender your phone and laptop at this time. The coordinated precision of our response, legal, financial, and criminal, had precisely the overwhelming effect we'd intended. Ethan looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world disintegrate in real time, each new development another support beam collapsing. This is a mistake, he insisted weakly, even as he surrendered his phone to Detective Larson. Maddie, please, can we talk privately for a moment? I believe we're past the point of private conversations, I replied, nodding to Lynn, who smoothly interceded. All communication with Ms. Harlow should be directed through my office going forward, she informed him, handing him her business card along with the folder of legal notices he had thus far refused to accept. As the officers began their methodical search, Ethan remained rooted in place, his legal mind visibly churning through options and finding none. What about my things? I have work documents, personal items. As I said, they'll be packed and delivered, I repeated. Unlike you, I respect personal property boundaries. His phone buzzed in Detective Larson's evidence bag, undoubtedly Vanessa wondering why he wasn't responding to her messages. Right on cue, the house phone rang moments later. I nodded to Naomi, who answered on speakerphone. Reynolds' residence, she said pleasantly. Who is this? Vanessa's voice sharp with suspicion. Where's Ethan? He's not answering his cell. Ethan is currently unavailable, Naomi replied. Would you like to leave a message? Who am I speaking with? Vanessa demanded. This is Vanessa Miller. I'm Ethan's accomplice, I suggested, loud enough to be heard. Co-conspirator? Unauthorized occupant of my home? The silence that followed vibrated with shock. Then, with remarkable composure, Madeline, you're out of the hospital. Indeed I am, I confirmed. And you're out of my house. Your belongings will be packed and delivered to your address of record. Anything left behind after 48 hours will be considered abandoned property. You can't just... I can, and I have, I interrupted. The occupancy clause in my grandmother's deed is quite explicit. Your presence here without my written consent constitutes trespassing and carries significant financial penalties, which you'll be receiving notice of shortly. Another silence. This one calculating rather than shocked. Whatever Ethan told you was recorded on my home security system, I finished, along with your discussions about accessing my accounts, selling my heirloom jewelry, and renovating my home without permission. The line went dead. Ethan, who had been listening to this exchange with increasing pallor, sagged against the wall. Maddie, please, we can work this out. Whatever you think you know is substantially less than what the police now know, Diana interjected, including evidence suggesting your involvement in tampering with Madeline's vehicle prior to her accident. That particular revelation had been strategically withheld until this moment, the final card in our carefully arranged hand. Ethan's reaction was everything we'd anticipated, shocked silence followed by visible panic. That's insane, he sputtered. I would never, you can't possibly believe. What I believe is less relevant than what the evidence suggests, I replied calmly. The mechanic you recommended has an interesting connection to your firm. The brake line shows signs of deliberate tampering. And your comments to Vanessa about the convenient timing of my accident raise considerable questions. Detective Larson stepped forward. Mr. Reynolds, in light of these allegations, I'd like you to accompany us to the station for further questioning. As the officers escorted Ethan out, not under arrest yet, but certainly not free to leave, I remained in my grandmother's chair, watching as the man I had once planned to marry departed between two uniformed officers. The front door closed, behind them with a definitive click, leaving my home suddenly, blissfully quiet. Diana squeezed my shoulder supportively while Lynn gathered her documents and Officer Reyes continued coordinating the evidence collection. Are you okay? Naomi asked softly, kneeling beside my chair. I considered the question carefully. The adrenaline of confrontation was ebbing, leaving room for the full emotional impact of the day's events. Yet beneath the inevitable tremors of aftermath, I felt something unexpected. A profound sense of reclamation, of pieces clicking back into proper alignment. I will be, I answered truthfully. This is just the beginning. And it was. The strategic advance had been executed with precision, but the true battle, for justice, for recovery, for rebuilding what had been so methodically undermined, was only just beginning. The aftermath of Ethan's departure left a strange resonance in the house, like the lingering vibration after a bell has been struck. The professional team continued their work, collecting evidence, documenting alterations to the property, photographing unauthorized changes. I watched with detached fascination as my private betrayal transformed into an official case file, my pain cataloged and indexed for legal proceedings. We should expect Vanessa to arrive soon, Lynn noted, checking her watch, based on her workplace's location and typical traffic patterns. I nodded, settling deeper into my grandmother's chair. I'm counting on it. Diana looked concerned. Are you certain you want to face her as well? It's been an exhausting day already. This isn't about what's easy, I replied. It's about reclaiming what's mine, completely. That includes confronting both of them. The next hour passed in methodical preparation. The police evidence team completed their initial sweep, departing with boxes of documents, electronics, and financial records. Officer Reyes remained, positioned discreetly in the kitchen with a clear view of the front entrance. Lynn arranged her legal notices on the entry table where they couldn't be missed, while Diana made calls coordinating the additional financial investigations, now accelerating in the wake of Ethan's questioning. When Naomi, still stationed by the window, announced, "Red sedan pulling up, it's her," I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. "Places, everyone," I said quietly, resuming my position in the wingback chair. Unlike Ethan's confused key-jiggling, Vanessa's approach was direct. A sharp, insistent knocking that quickly escalated to pounding when no one immediately answered. "Ethan!" she called through the door, her voice carrying clearly. "Open up! What's going on?" Naomi opened the door with the same neutral expression she'd offered Ethan. Vanessa, sleek in a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, copper hair pulled into a professional chignon, recoiled in surprise. "Who are you?" she demanded. Then recognition dawned. "You're Madeline's friend, the one who called earlier." "Come in, Vanessa," I called from my position in the living room. "We've been expecting you." She stepped cautiously over the threshold, her eyes darting around the entryway, undoubtedly noting the missing items she'd become accustomed to seeing. When her gaze landed on me, she froze, not with the shocked paralysis Ethan had displayed, but with the calculating stillness of a predator reassessing a situation. "Madeline," she acknowledged, her voice modulated to professional courtesy. "This is unexpected. I understood you were still in recovery." "Clearly," I replied, gesturing to the room around us. "Otherwise, you might have been more cautious about redecorating my home." Unlike Ethan's stammering denials, Vanessa shifted, immediately to damage control. "I can see how this looks, but there's been a misunderstanding. Ethan asked me to help prepare the house for your return, make it more accessible during your recovery. By replacing my mattress? Removing my family? Photographs? Planning extensive renovations to a historically protected property?" I asked, watching her composure flicker. "Or perhaps you were making it more accessible by wearing my clothes and jewelry while you were at it." Her expression hardened. "Where's Ethan?" "Currently answering questions at the police station," Lynn interjected, stepping forward with professional authority. "Lynn Mercer, Ms. Harlow's attorney. You'll find these documents relevant to your situation." Unlike Ethan, Vanessa took the offered folder, flipping through its contents with rapid efficiency. I watched her face as she absorbed the occupancy violation, the financial penalties, the restraining order. Each page turning brought another micro-expression of calculation rather than distress. "This is absurd," she finally declared, closing the folder with a snap. "You can't possibly enforce these archaic property clauses, and these accusations of financial impropriety are completely unfounded." "The district attorney disagrees," Officer Reyes commented, emerging from the kitchen. "As does the forensic accounting team that's been tracking the money movement from Ms. Harlow's accounts to offshore holdings linked to both you and Mr. Reynolds." Vanessa's professional facade cracked slightly. "I don't know what Ethan may have done with his finances, but I certainly haven't accessed my accounts using a forged signature and a wig designed to make you resemble me on bank cameras," I finished. "The evidence suggests otherwise, including testimony from Bailey Wilson at First Regional Bank, who processed those withdrawals and has now identified you from photograph lineups." For the first time, genuine alarm registered in her expression. "I want my attorney." "Another excellent decision," I agreed, though I suspect even the best legal representation will struggle with the mounting evidence. She drew herself up, reclaiming her composure through sheer force of will. "This is harassment. I've been a guest in this house at Ethan's invitation, nothing more." "A guest who moved in her belongings, replaced the owner's furniture, planned renovations, and discussed selling property that wasn't hers? Diana asked, her tone deceptively mild. That's an unusual definition of guest. Furthermore, Lynn added, the occupancy clause is quite specific. Even as Mr. Reynolds's invited guest, your residence here without Ms. Harlow's written permission constitutes a violation carrying significant financial penalties. Vanessa's gaze hardened as she reassessed her position. What do you want? Clearly, this elaborate setup isn't just about enforcing some obscure housing clause. Justice, I replied simply. Return of all misappropriated funds, criminal charges where appropriate, and your immediate departure from my home. And if I refuse to cooperate? She challenged, a last attempt at bravado. I smiled, the expression feeling foreign yet satisfying on my face. Then, instead of the simplified civil settlement we're prepared to offer in exchange for your cooperation with the criminal investigation, you'll face the full spectrum of charges: financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and potential accessory charges related to the vehicle tampering that caused my accident. The color drained from her face at the mention of the accident. I had nothing to do with any accident. Perhaps, I conceded. Though your recorded conversations with Ethan regarding the convenient timing suggest at minimum knowledge after the fact. The district attorney might find that distinction less meaningful than you hope. Officer Reyes stepped forward. Ms. Miller, we have a warrant to search your personal belongings within this residence. You may observe the search or wait elsewhere. But I must ask that you surrender your phone and any electronic devices in your possession. Vanessa's hand tightened reflexively around her purse. This is excessive. I haven't done anything wrong. The search warrant suggests probable cause indicating otherwise, Officer Reyes replied evenly, extending her hand. After a tense moment, Vanessa surrendered her phone and tablet, her movements stiff with suppressed rage. I want to observe the search of my belongings. Of course, Officer Reyes agreed. Though I should clarify, they're Ms. Harlow's belongings that you've been using without permission, including, I believe, the clothing you're wearing now. Vanessa glanced down, at her outfit, a flash of uncertainty crossing her features. This isn't the Burberry blazer from my closet? It absolutely is, I interrupted. The alteration stitches at the cuffs are quite distinctive. My grandmother's handiwork. I'd recognize it anywhere. The realization that she stood before, me literally draped in stolen property, seemed to finally penetrate Vanessa's armor of denial. Her shoulders sagged minutely, not surrender, but acknowledgement that her position had become untenable. Fine, she said tightly. I'll cooperate with the search. But I maintain that any financial transactions were conducted with Ethan's approval as your fiancé with implied authority over joint resources. A legal theory you're welcome to test in court, Lynn replied. Though the forged signatures and disguised appearances at the bank undermine that defense considerably. As Officer Reyes escorted Vanessa upstairs to observe the search of her belongings, I remained in my grandmother's chair, processing the second confrontation of the day. Unlike with Ethan, whose collapse had brought a wave of complex emotions, Vanessa's calculated responses left me feeling oddly respected. Two strategists acknowledging a decisive move in a high-stakes game. She's dangerous, Diana observed quietly once Vanessa was out of earshot. Much more so than Ethan. I know, I agreed. That's why the financial fraud charges are crucial. We need her focused on her own legal jeopardy rather than potential retaliation. Naomi brought me water, her expression concerned. How are you holding up? I considered the question seriously, taking stock of my physical and emotional state. The adrenaline that had carried me through the day was ebbing, leaving bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. Yet beneath the fatigue lay something solid and sustaining, a foundation of certainty that I had reclaimed not just my physical space but my agency. I'm ready for this to be over, I admitted. But I'm not finished yet. The sounds of the search continued overhead, drawers opening, closet doors sliding, the methodical documentation of everything Vanessa had appropriated during her unauthorized residence. Each photographed item, each logged possession was another strand in the web of evidence tightening around her and Ethan. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned. Overwhelming, irrefutable evidence delivered with coordinated precision. Yet as the day stretched into evening, I knew the true battle was just beginning. Criminal investigations, civil litigation, financial recovery, and most challenging of all, rebuilding a life that had been systematically undermined for months before I'd even suspected betrayal. Looking around my altered living room, this space I would need to reclaim not just legally, but emotionally, I made a silent commitment to my grandmother, whose foresight had given me the tools to fight back. This house would be mine again, truly mine, not just in deed but in spirit. And no one would ever again mistake my kindness for weakness or my trust for vulnerability. The following days unfolded with the inexorable momentum of an avalanche. What had begun as a private betrayal transformed into a multifaceted legal case that rippled through Oak Ridge Heights' professional community and beyond. Ethan was formally charged 48 hours after our confrontation. The list of allegations read like a legal textbook on trust violation, financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, forgery, and most seriously, allegations of criminal tampering with a vehicle leading to bodily harm. His law firm placed him on immediate unpaid leave pending the outcome of the proceedings, their statement carefully distancing themselves from his actions while expressing shock and dismay at the charges against a previously respected colleague. Vanessa faced her own set of charges, though her attorney, a shark-eyed woman whose reputation for ruthlessness matched her client's calculating nature, immediately began negotiating a cooperation agreement. Within days, she had provided detailed testimony about the financial scheme, documentation of their coordinated identity theft efforts, and access to encrypted communications that further implicated Ethan. "She's saving herself at his expense," Diana observed during one of our daily strategy sessions in my gradually reclaimed living room. Classic prisoner's dilemma. First one to cooperate gets the better deal. "Is she claiming ignorance about the accident?" I asked, reviewing the latest update from the district attorney's office. Lynn consulted her notes. "She maintains she had no prior knowledge of any vehicle tampering, though she admits suspicions arose afterward based on comments Ethan made. She's providing specifics about those conversations in exchange for immunity on any accident-related charges." The betrayal within the betrayal, the ultimate loyalty test, failed. I couldn't summon sympathy for either of them. Beyond the criminal proceedings, the financial recovery efforts progressed with surprising efficiency. Howard's team had frozen the offshore accounts before significant dispersal could occur, and with Vanessa's cooperation, the remaining funds were located and secured pending court orders for their return. "We've recovered approximately 87% of the diverted assets," Howard reported during a conference call. "The remainder appears to have been spent on luxury purchases, designer clothing, high-end electronics, and a down payment on a boat that's now been impounded as evidence." The physical reclamation of my home proceeded in parallel with the legal processes. A professional cleaning service purged every trace of Vanessa's presence, her scents, her carelessly discarded items, the subtle markers of territorial claim she had distributed throughout my spaces. Contractors reversed the unauthorized modifications, restoring walls that had been prematurely opened for the planned renovations, repairing fixtures that had been removed in preparation for modernization. Most precious were the family items recovered during the police search. My mother's jewelry box with most of its contents intact, photograph albums that had been relegated to the attic, my grandmother's handwritten recipe book discovered stuffed in a kitchen drawer. Each reclaimed item felt like retrieving a piece of myself that had been casually discarded by people who couldn't recognize their true value. The community response surprised me most. I had expected whispers, sideways glances, the subtle ostracism that often accompanies public scandal. Instead, I found unexpected support from neighbors who had apparently harbored their own suspicions about Ethan and Vanessa's activities during my absence. "Never liked the way they paraded around like they owned the place," Mrs. Abernathy declared. During an impromptu visit, bearing a homemade casserole and decades of neighborhood watchfulness. "That woman had the nerve to tell me she was planning to remove your grandmother's rose garden for a more modern landscape design." I knew right. Then something wasn't right. Professional relationships required more delicate navigation. My interior design clients expressed universal support, though I detected the occasional undercurrent of morbid curiosity beneath their sympathy. My decision to be selectively transparent, acknowledging the betrayal and fraud without dwelling on details, seemed to satisfy propriety while preserving my dignity. The most unexpected outcome emerged 3 weeks after the confrontation, when Detective Larson requested an urgent meeting at the station. Diana accompanied me, her protective instincts on high alert despite my improved physical condition. "We've made a concerning discovery," Larson explained, sliding a folder across his desk. Forensic analysis of Ethan's cloud storage revealed these documents. Inside were detailed research materials on untraceable poisons, electronic articles about inducing seemingly natural cardiac events, and most chillingly, a draft amendment to my will that would have left everything to Ethan in the event of my death, an amendment I had never seen, much less authorized. "We believe they were planning a more permanent solution if your recovery progressed faster than they anticipated," Larson stated, his professional detachment barely masking genuine concern. The vehicle tampering may have been just the first attempt. The knowledge that the person I had planned to marry had not only betrayed my trust, but actively researched methods to end my life, should have devastated me. Instead, it crystallized a strange gratitude for my accident, the very event that had revealed the danger lurking in my home, sleeping beside me, planning my demise with spreadsheets and legal documents. "This changes the prosecution's approach," Diana noted as we left the station. "Premeditated attempted murder carries significantly higher penalties than fraud or identity theft." "Good," I said simply, surprised by the steel in my own voice. The media eventually caught wind of the case, inevitable given Ethan's position at a prominent law firm and the sensational nature of the charges. Local news outlets ran carefully worded stories about alleged financial improprieties and more. Serious charges against a local attorney and his accomplice. National outlets picked up the more lurid aspects, particularly once the attempted murder allegations became public. I declined all interview requests, issuing a single statement through Lynn that requested privacy and expressed confidence in the legal process. My silence fueled speculation but preserved what mattered most: my agency in determining how much of my story became public consumption. As the criminal proceedings advanced toward inevitable trials or plea agreements, I focused increasingly on rebuilding rather than retribution. My physical recovery progressed steadily, each therapy session strengthening muscles weakened by weeks of hospital confinement. The lingering effects of my injuries, occasional shortness of breath, a slight limp that emerged when I was tired, served as physical reminders of both betrayal and survival. The house gradually returned to its former self, though subtly transformed by my new perspective. I replaced the mattress Vanessa and Ethan had shared, donated the furniture they had purchased, and reconfigured spaces they had altered, not to erase what had happened, but to reclaim ownership over my environment. "You're handling this with remarkable grace," Naomi observed one evening as we shared wine on the restored porch, watching fireflies illuminate the garden where my grandmother's roses continued their stubborn blooming. "I'd be setting things on fire and salting the earth." I smiled, tracing the rim of my glass. "Some days I want to. But destruction isn't the opposite of what they did. Creation is. They tried to dismantle my life piece by piece. Rebuilding it stronger is the best response I can imagine." The financial penalties from the occupancy clause mounted daily during the legal proceedings. Vanessa's unauthorized residence ultimately generating a civil judgment of $43,000, which her attorney unsuccessfully attempted to have dismissed as an unreasonable contract term. The court's validation of my grandmother's foresight felt like posthumous vindication of her cautious approach to property and trust. 6 weeks after the confrontation, as autumn painted the neighborhood in transitional hues, I received the final confirmation I had been waiting for. Ethan had accepted a plea agreement. 20 years for financial fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. Vanessa's cooperation earned her a reduced sentence of 7 years for her role in the financial crimes, though her professional future in legal work was permanently ended. The resolution brought no joy, only a quiet certainty that consequences had aligned with actions. The system that Ethan had manipulated as an attorney had ultimately held him accountable through its methodical processes and burden of evidence. As I signed the final paperwork authorizing the return of my recovered funds from the court's escrow accounts, Diana squeezed my shoulder supportively. "It's really over," she said quietly. "You've reclaimed everything they tried to take." Almost everything, I thought, but didn't say. Some losses couldn't be recovered. The unquestioning trust I had once given freely. The optimistic belief in shared futures. The simple security of falling asleep without scanning for threats. Those would require a different kind of reclamation, a longer journey of rebuilding from within. But watching the autumn light filter through my grandmother's stained glass window, the one Vanessa had planned to replace with something more contemporary, I felt the first genuine stirrings of forward momentum. The house stood solid around me, its foundations unshaken despite all attempts to undermine them. Like my grandmother before me, I had weathered an unexpected storm, emerging not just intact but wiser, more resilient, and firmly in possession of what was mine. Both the physical deed with its protective clause and the deeper deed to my own life and future. 1 year after the accident that had nearly claimed my life, and inadvertently saved it, I stood in my grandmother's garden, pruning shears in hand, assessing the early spring growth with an expert's eye. The heritage roses were budding, stubbornly, adhering to their own timetable rather than conforming to the calendar's official declaration of the season. "Just like you," I murmured to them, gently removing deadwood to make space for new growth. "Blooming when you're ready, not when you're expected to." The metaphor wasn't lost on me. My own recovery, physical, financial, emotional, had followed a similar pattern of unexpected resilience and refusal to be rushed by external expectations. The physical healing had come first, my body gradually reclaiming its strength through disciplined therapy and deliberate challenges. The slight hitch in my step that emerged when I was tired remained, but I had grown to appreciate it as a reminder rather than resent it as a limitation. Some scars served as useful memories. Financial restoration had proceeded with surprising efficiency thanks to Howard's meticulous tracking and the court's decisive action. The recovered funds had been reinvested with more diversified protections, trusts established with multiple verification layers, accounts secured with biometric authentication that no one could forge. My grandmother would have approved of these modern extensions of her own careful approach to financial security. The emotional terrain had proven most challenging to navigate, trust damaged not by sudden impact, but by long-term erosion, discovery of deception extending far beyond what I had initially suspected. Through the criminal proceedings, I had learned that Ethan's betrayal predated our engagement, that the foundations of our relationship had been compromised from much earlier than I had realized. "Timber delivery for the gazebo restoration," called a voice from the side gate, interrupting my reflections. The contractor, a woman in her 50s with capable hands and an encyclopedic knowledge of historical construction techniques, waited for my acknowledgement before directing her crew toward the back garden. The gazebo restoration was my most recent reclamation project, rebuilding the Victorian structure my grandmother had loved but that had fallen into disrepair during the years I'd focused on my design career. Ethan had suggested demolishing it. Vanessa had envisioned replacing it with a more functional outdoor kitchen space. Their plans for erasing my history had extended even to this small corner of the property. Now it would be restored properly, with historically accurate materials and techniques, preserving its original character while ensuring it would stand for another century. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it satisfied something deep within me. As I watched the restoration team unload aged timber that matched the original construction, Diana's car pulled into the driveway. Her visits had evolved from legal consultations to genuine friendship over the past year, her forthright manner and protective instincts providing a steadying influence during the turbulent aftermath. "Good news?" I asked as she approached, noting the folder tucked under her arm. "Final disbursement from the restitution fund," she confirmed, holding up the documents. "The last of Vanessa's liquidated assets has been processed by the court. This closes the financial chapter completely." We settled on the porch swing, another restoration project completed months earlier, to review the documents. The legal language was precise, formal, definitive. All claims satisfied, all accounts reconciled, all obligations fulfilled. The machinery of justice had processed the measurable aspects of betrayal into neat columns of debits and credits, translating emotional devastation into actionable remedies. "How does it feel?" Diana asked as I signed the final acknowledgement. "To have everything resolved officially?" I considered the question carefully, watching the restoration team measure and mark the gazebo's foundation. Like closing a book I never wanted to read but couldn't put down. I know how it ends now. After Diana departed, I spent the afternoon in my home office, finalizing designs for a new client, my professional life having gradually resumed its rhythm in recent months. The interior design business had weathered the scandal with surprising resilience, clients more interested in my established aesthetic reputation than my personal drama. Some had even specifically sought me out after hearing my story, drawn to what one client called my proven ability to recognize what has value and protect it accordingly. As evening approached, I moved through rooms that no longer felt haunted by invasion. The house had been thoroughly reclaimed, not just through physical restoration, but through the accumulation of new memories layered over the tainted ones. Dinner gatherings with friends who had stood by me, work sessions spreading blueprints across the dining table, quiet evenings alone that felt peaceful rather than lonely. In the study, I paused before the wall where I had installed a new security system, one that would have impressed even my security-conscious grandmother. Modern technology offering protections for the vulnerable points she had sought to secure, through legal clauses and careful documentation. Her methods had saved me. I had updated them for a new century of potential threats. The phone rang. Naomi, calling with an update on her engagement party planning. Her happiness had been a bright counterpoint to my recovery journey, a reminder that trust appropriately placed could still yield joy rather than betrayal. I had accepted her invitation to be maid of honor with genuine pleasure rather than the reflexive wariness that had initially colored all relationship discussions after Ethan. Later, as darkness settled over the neighborhood, I sat in my grandmother's wingback chair, the same chair from which I had confronted Ethan and Vanessa a year earlier. The symmetry wasn't planned, but felt appropriate nonetheless. Full circle, though spiraling upward rather than returning to the same point. A message arrived from Detective Larson, now Police Captain Larson following her promotion. "Thought you'd want to know. Reynolds' appeal was denied today. Sentence stands." I acknowledged the update with brief thanks, experiencing neither vindication nor distress at the news. Ethan's fate had gradually detached from my daily thoughts, becoming a footnote rather than a headline in my ongoing story. The same applied to Vanessa, whose occasional appearance in legal updates generated increasingly less emotional response. They had been reduced to what they had tried to make me, background characters in someone else's narrative. The restoration team had left precise drawings of tomorrow's gazebo work on the kitchen counter for my approval. I reviewed them carefully, appreciating both their respect for historical accuracy and their thoughtful modernizations where safety required. Preservation balanced with progress, another metaphor that resonated beyond the architectural context. My grandmother's deed with its protective occupancy clause remained in the safe, its legal language now familiar as family history. I had considered updating it, perhaps modernizing its terminology or strengthening its provisions based on my experience. Ultimately, I had decided to leave it unchanged, a testament to her foresight and a reminder that sometimes the best protections are those established long before they're needed. The diary I had begun during my hospital recovery sat open on my desk, its early pages filled with raw anger and confusion, gradually giving way to analytical clarity and eventually to forward-focused planning. The most recent entries contained renovation sketches, client project notes, and garden planning, life continuing rather than being defined by betrayal. As I prepared for bed in the master suite, now completely redesigned and bearing no resemblance to the space Ethan and Vanessa had invaded, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back bore physical similarities to the one who had trusted too easily, loved too blindly, and nearly paid with her life. But the resemblance ended at the surface. Behind my eyes now lived a woman who understood that safety sometimes required vigilance, that trust should be earned rather than freely given, that the most dangerous threats often wore the most convincing disguises of care. But alongside those, necessary cautions remained a capacity for joy, for connection, for forward movement that neither accident nor betrayal had managed to extinguish. Tomorrow, the gazebo restoration would continue. Next week, a new design project would begin. In Chakdiwat, the months ahead, Naomi's wedding would celebrate love that could still be genuine despite my experience with its counterfeit. My grandmother had protected the house with a carefully worded legal clause, ensuring it would remain in trusted hands. I had learned to apply similar protection to myself: discernment about who received access, vigilance about boundaries, recognition of my own worth beyond what others might seek to extract from me. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought of the deed safely stored away, its elegant script establishing boundaries that had ultimately saved me from those who sought to claim what wasn't theirs to take. The house had remained mine because of her foresight, and I had remained myself, wounded but whole, changed but not diminished, because somewhere within me had lived my grandmother's same steel core of self-preservation and quiet determination to protect what mattered most. The most valuable deed, I realized as sleep approached, wasn't the one to the house at all. It was the deed to myself, the rightful ownership of my future that no one could mortgage, leverage, or steal again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.